What's up, Steelers fans? Welcome back to another episode of Around the Burgh. We're here with our post 2022 NFL draft recap. We're going to go through all the picks. We'll talk about the underactive free agents. We'll talk about some of the NFL signings that were made relatively very recently. And then maybe we'll get into just some of the general draft talk. I'm your host, Mitchell Wolf, here with my co host, Shane Kubis. Shane, how you doing?
Well, it was definitely a marathon. I spent the weekend in Pittsburgh with
Mhm.
some friends, and I watched everything and was able to follow everything. But yeah, feeling some mixed feelings for sure. But we'll get into the draft as a whole here.
I think it's very rare that you come out of a Steelers draft being like, man, just like they hit on everything. I
Yeah,
think
it's
probably
yeah
the 2017 with Watt, Juju,
yeah that was tough to complain
Sutton,
about.
Conor.
Yeah,
That was a good one. I'm saying
yeah,
like that. Like couldn't really find holes in that, but then like 18 disappointing, and then kind of up and down from there. But
yeah.
you know, so I guess we'll start at the top. Obviously, Kenny Pickett's the first round pick. He's the first quarterback off the board and was the first quarterback until pick 74, I think.
Yeah, 73 or 4, one of the two.
Yeah, and it was like one of the longest gaps between the first and second quarterback in NFL draft history. So
Yeah,
I think neither of us honestly expected this. I think we were both
no,
thinking it would be Ritter.
yeah.
Um,
If Willis wasn't there,
yes, right.
yeah,
And they both were. They had their
yeah,
pick of quarterbacks.
yeah, they did. Yeah,
And they went with the guy, like Tomlin said, we looked around the country and we ended up with the guy who was next door, which is interesting.
yeah. Uh, I think that's where we should start with this conversation because the fact that Pickett was the first guy off the board isn't the most surprising thing because I could
Hmm.
have easily seen him go to Carolina at 6 if they just wanted to make sure they had a guy who was probably better than Sam Darnold, right? Like if they
Hmm.
were just trying to kind of collectively save that staff and that front office's job, and they thought he could at least do enough to get that done.
Hmm.
But outside of that, I kind of expected it to be more likely Willis, obviously. Um, but the fact that he was not only the first quarterback, but then, like you said, the first one for over 50 picks
Hmm.
is really, I think, the most surprising aspect to this for me, as far as that process goes for the league and for the Steelers.
Yeah, and we were talking about this before we started recording, and that I think some people will say like, "Oh, like they should have waited, like they could have gotten him at second round, third round." It's like we really don't know that.
You
Like,
don't, you
and
don't.
I get why you want to play that game, but it's not fair to do it because you just don't know. Like the draft is so unpredictable, and especially this year, once you kind of got into the meat of it, after the first 10 picks, it really kind of started going off the rails.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Um, but yeah, so you just can't predict that. Like there could be trades, there could be all kinds of stuff. So I think that's a game you don't want to play. With regards to Pickett, and I think you could be like, oh, like they just went with the guy next door. It's like for what it's worth, they did their due diligence
They
on
did, they did.
every
Yeah,
quarterback in this class. Like they've been to tons of Howell's games. They were looking into Willis a ton. They were very close with Ritter. There was even talk about them in Corral. Um, so they've really looked into everybody and said, and they probably came with like, all right, Pickett's our guy. They said, we were surprised that he was on the board at 20, that we didn't have to trade up to get him. Um, I think there was a report that said like they were talking with somebody that was like 2 or 3 picks ahead of them about possibly trading up just to get ahead of the Saints. I think it was just
yeah. In
because.
case the Saints decide to go with Olave and then him. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. So, which I get, and then they didn't have to do that, which is great. So it is what it is, and I think you can see this pick, and you're like, all right, like I disagree with it from a ceiling point, but the logic of the pick is very easy to follow,
yeah. It is.
and it makes sense with how the Steelers operate.
And that's kind of the thing about it to me is that, yeah, of the guys in this class, if I had to bet on one of them being a starting quarterback for any extended amount of time over the course of the next 4 or 5, 6 years, whatever it
Hmm.
is, he probably would be my bet just because one, the experience level, the way he plays the game, there's nothing he does outside of like the pocket awareness issue where he kind of scrambles way too quickly sometimes, which honestly the way the game is played now that's not nearly as bad as not
Hmm.
being able to sense pressure like some guys can't.
Yeah.
But outside of that, there's nothing he does where I go like, wow, that's going to keep him from playing at the next level, or
Right.
wow, I don't know if he'll be able to replicate that. So
Hmm.
from that perspective, yeah, he's probably the safest of the quarterbacks from my perspective looking
Yes.
at them. But at the same time, there's a reason for that. And I think that his ceiling ultimately, I don't see him being better than around the middle ish of the pack of starting quarterbacks. And maybe that's enough to get this team where they want to go, but it's also not a guarantee that it's enough to get them where they want to go.
Yeah, this is a move from a team that will never tank and
No.
is like, we can be in the thick of it at all times, which
Yes.
when you look at the rest of the division with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, and as Charles McDonald calls him, the nasty man in
Yes, the
Cleveland,
nasty man. Yeah.
it's quite the arms race, even
It
without even
is.
getting to the rest of the conference. But
Exactly.
I think there, and this kind of is exhibited by the rest of the picks they made. They said, listen, we can surround this guy and most guys, and that's kind of the other side of the coin of it. But we can surround him with enough talent on offense and defense where we feel that we could be a playoff team. And getting that quarterback on that rookie deal, I think that's obviously the strategy that everybody's employing now. The problem is like we still don't really know if Kenny Pickett can beat out Mitch Trubisky as a starter.
That's my concern, and we talked about this before the show too, is to me, if he does not start within the first 3 or 4 weeks of the season, right? Like maybe Mitch did enough where they don't want to just bury him on the depth chart immediately, and they feel like he did really beat him out.
Mm-hmm.
And if Trubisky obviously struggles early on, then you go to Pickett because you can.
Mm-hmm.
But if Pickett doesn't win the job out of camp, that's a big red flag right off the bat for me that this pick isn't going to really move the needle at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because I said this as well before we started recording that I think that people kind of hating on Trubisky as a player has kind of jumped the shark. I think him going as the number 2 overall pick was crazy.
Yeah, even at the time, it was just really weird.
Especially ahead of the nasty man and Patrick Mahomes, which at that time Mahomes wasn't what he is now, but still.
No, still.
But I think Trubisky, like, he can be serviceable. Like, I mean, they got to the playoffs that one year mostly on the back of the defense, but like he was not a major issue. And then after that, like the team just got worse every year, not through any fault of his. And then he got back to the playoffs again a few years later with a worse team.
Yeah. I think the thing with Mitch is like, and maybe the way that people, even I was guilty of this for a while, the way people view him at this point is a guy that, and a lot of guys are in this position, but more so than the normal, you need to have a structure around him that allows him to just kind of not have to think too much, right?
Yeah.
His worst part of his game to me is his ability to progress across the field in a timely fashion, right? Decision making in general. When you give him easy reads or get him on the move, allow him to do a lot of stuff, which that's what Canada wants to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Ultimately. So he's a good fit from the get-go, and that's one of the reasons why he was the guy that I think made the most sense as a free agent addition. But he doesn't have – I don't think he'll ever be a good enough processor to elevate himself much farther than that. But work with that skill set, especially early on until teams start to kind of try to cancel some of that stuff out. I think he would be probably better this year in this system than Pickett would be in year one, realistically, for me. I'm willing to bet that.
Fair.
But it's hard to say if Pickett's just you don't have as many questions about his ability to do that as you would with Trubisky. So if you want to elevate the offense or move a little bit past just like the 1-2 read, get on the move stuff, that would be where Pickett's going to do a better job, I think, right away.
So let's say that, and this is kind of my other problem with the pick, is he said, we're drafting Kenny Pickett and he has the opportunity to come in and compete for a starting job. It's like, you don't draft players in the first round to compete for a starting job.
No, you don't.
That's just not what you do. But that's beside the point. Let's say like him and Trubisky, let's say they each start like 2 preseason, or I guess, are there only 3 preseason games?
There's 3 preseason games now.
Okay. So let's say they each start 1 because the last one is kind of just a whatever. That'll be Mason's game to start.
Yeah, or unless unless Mason's like, trade me, I don't want to compete with freaking Kenny Pickett. Like, all right, dude, you can go somewhere.
All right.
else.
I mean, I can't imagine any team that doesn't have a litany of quarterback injuries giving up draft capital for Mason Rudolph.
No, they'll just sign him for $2 off the free agent market. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, let's say like they each start a game and they both play about the same.
Yeah, they show a similar level of understanding of the offense and stuff like that.
What would you prefer the team to do going into week 1?
Pickett, because if you give the tie to the rookie you draft in the first round.
Okay.
Because Trubisky, you're not paying him enough money to say we're like, okay, you're wasting a ton of money by keeping on the bench when he's playing at the same level. But to me, for a guy that's his biggest attribute is he's ready to play, realistically. If he needed a year, or if I thought he could benefit from a year, and really any quarterback can, but especially guys like Willis, even Ritter to a certain degree maybe, could use that year just to get acclimated. I don't think Pickett has that same necessity.
Yeah.
So you might as well play him if he looks as ready as Trubisky does.
I think that's a good argument. I'll give the other side, and this I
Right.
think I might actually lean this way, is that I think if you put Trubisky out there first, you
Fair.
kind of say
Yeah.
like, all right, go until you fail.
Right.
And I think if you do that with Pickett, you run the risk of him failing early on and kind of losing confidence. And if you bench
Yeah.
him, I think so I guess this is kind of my question. What is worse, like Pickett not starting or Pickett getting benched?
It really is a mental makeup thing. I like to think that Pickett might have the mental makeup to handle that. But at the
I
same
agree.
time, I'd rather not ever bench a starting quarterback that's a rookie if I
Yes.
don't have to.
Yes.
So I think, yeah, realistically, I'd rather him just not start off the get-go and let Mitch go out there and see what he can do. And if
Mhm.
it doesn't work out, or if he just isn't playing well enough to justify not putting in your rookie starter,
Mhm.
then you do that. But
Yeah, and like let's say they they get to the bye week, they're 500 or a game below it or whatever. Then you make the switch.
yeah, I
Not
think
like
you do
ideally
that.
it's an early bye week, but
Right, ideally. Yeah, I think that's really what this comes down to is like clearly they want to win right now. We knew
Mhm.
that, right? Like regardless of what they would have done,
Yeah.
it was going to be with the intention of trying to win this year coming up.
Yes.
And I think what they're going to do, and it doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks about it, obviously. They're going to look at these two in camp and in the preseason, and they're just going to basically say, okay, who do we think is going to win more games?
Mhm.
And if that's Mitch, then Mitch is going to play.
Yeah.
If it's Pickett, which I kind of think that's what they're going to think, then it's
Mhm.
going to be him. But that's really all that they care about right now. It's
Mhm.
not about development. It's not about like whether they think he should sit or not. It's going to be based on whether they think he can come in right away and win more games than Trubisky can.
Yeah. I think this goes back, and it doesn't really apply to the quarterbacks as much, but if you
Right.
think about the players this team has like found later in the draft, they very much value the competition and performance in training camp in the preseason, such
They do.
that if you're playing well, like you will get the like just last year, the Jameer Jones Quincy Roche thing.
Yes,
It's like Jameer Jones balled out in the preseason. They're
it
like,
did.
listen, you were UDFA, the other guy was a draft pick, but we're gonna try to sneak him on a practice squad, and you're getting a hat, you're
Yeah.
getting an active roster spot. So, they're they are true to that. Like they're saying, like whoever plays the best will get the
Yeah.
start,
They put
regardless
their
of
they put their money where their mouth is for
yes,
sure with
which
those
I
with those
appreciate that.
situations.
That's a
I
good
do
thing to
too.
do.
It's the best practice, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about with the quarterback thing, this quarterback thing, before we
I
move
mean,
on to the rest of the
right.
class?
I just again like I hope obviously, and I want to preface this because this is what happens whenever you say this stuff and fans hear it and stuff. I want Kenny Pickett to be
Oh
great,
yeah, absolutely.
right? A lot of
It's
people,
a
right?
great
It's
story.
an awesome
It's
story.
awesome.
Like if he comes out and we win 11 games this year in the
Yeah.
AFC, and it's because of him, I'll be the first one to say that I love him now. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't. It doesn't matter, but we always have to approach this from a process standpoint, right?
Mhm.
We know at this point is who's been drafted and what we think of those players. We
Yeah.
do not know how they're going to play in the NFL. This class, as much as I think overall it's a good class, we'll get more into it. They could all be terrible. Will they all
Mhm.
be terrible? Probably not, because the
No.
Steelers don't have that happen very much. But we have to look at it from what we understand or know about these players now. And to me, taking him in the first round and having everyone available to you at quarterback, especially factoring in again how late the rest of the guys went, I don't think it was the best process
Mhm.
to go through at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I really can't imagine, like, if you're rooting against Kenny Pickett
Yeah,
just so
you're
your
just
take
lame,
is correct about
honestly.
it being a bad pick, that's just like,
Yeah,
and maybe you're not a
it's
fan of the team, so then it kind of
yeah, it
makes sense,
doesn't
but
matter.
still.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. So now we'll get into the more fun picks. So in the second round, they get George Pickens Jr., wide receiver out of
Yes.
Georgia. And, if the Steelers take a wide receiver in the second round, you might as well start making the
Yeah.
bust, stitching the gold jacket.
You might as well draft him in your fantasy league.
Yeah.
It's yeah. This is my personal favorite pick in the draft for
Yeah, I
them,
think I'd agree with that.
just because I had a first on him.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously factoring in injuries and some of the maturity stuff that
The
came out.
tape is first round
Yeah,
tape.
the tape grade is first round for sure.
Yes.
The fact that you could get him this late in the second is even then still a bit of a steal, even factoring in all those things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's such a Steelers player.
Yeah.
Like I was worried the Ravens were going to take him at 45.
Oh,
They got a
God.
great pick too,
Of
unfortunately.
course they did. They always do.
But yeah, we don't want to even talk about the Ravens
Yeah.
draft at this point. But but he's a classic, like just rough and tough. Just like he's gonna do the stuff that Juju tried to do for us occasionally, as far as being the physical presence. He's gonna be able to do that stuff, but he's a truly good player as well. Right, and that's the thing that's I think going to make him very special. And then, as I talked about, I tweeted about this, and I said it on a reply, I think, to one of the things you put on the Steelers Twitter. The narrative of Chase Claypool being primarily a slot receiver is very alive and well right now, and I am thriving
Big
because
power
of it.
slot is
Yes,
back, baby.
exactly. I am thriving because of it.
Yeah.
I am going to be insufferable if he's awesome in the slot this year, if that's where he plays primarily. That's all I'm going to be talking about.
And even Pickens can give you a little bit of slot stuff.
Yeah, he
too.
can. He's good
Like,
after the catch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, with Pickens, like the size at 6'2", almost 200 pounds,
Yeah.
the length, the ability to win in the air, get down the field vertically, make incredible catches through contact, make contested catches down the field. That's not something that Chase Claypool was the best at.
Right.
And therefore, you can put him in a role he is more comfortable with, where he's in the slot, doesn't have to deal with press as much, doesn't have to deal with contact as much, at least at the catch point and at the line of scrimmage.
Right.
And get him on the run. Whereas with Pickens, you can just throw it up to him, and he'll most likely come down with it. Like his drop rate, and I'm going to look up his contested catch rate too now.
It was disgusting.
But it's crazy low. And granted, like he didn't have that many targets because of the injuries and everything.
But still,
yeah.
it's hard to ignore the ways that you saw him just take the football away in the air. Like it was, and that's what I love about it the most. Is not only is he a player that's well worth the spot here, but he does all the things that Chase hasn't been able to unlock fully yet. Now he's shown the glimpses to do those things, like the Vikings catch last year and some of the stuff from his rookie year. He's capable of it, but he's not as comfortable doing that. And you could tell he's just not as comfortable with those types of situations. And now you can ask him not to do that nearly as much and just let him, like you said, run, get on crossing routes, get across the field, get in front of safety's faces and go up the side. Like that type of stuff that he's already able to do well can be his primary role instead of just something he only does sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm looking at his numbers now. So he only has 2 career drops on 139 targets.
That's
which is
it's got to be
2.2%.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty good.
And I'm looking at his contested catch numbers, and it is a little weird because his snaps obviously decreased due to injuries, but he made 2 of 2 this year. He was 9 of 14 in 2020 and 5 of 18 when he was a true freshman. Now, I have to wonder how many of those were Jake Fromm underthrows that he just had no real shot coming back to.
I'm willing to bet a good bit.
Yeah,
based on what we know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'll give him a little bit of benefit.
But you see, again, the numbers are kind of weird in terms of sample size, but you see the improvement in that. So I'm really excited for what he can do, and obviously, like, this is the most violent Steelers receiver since Hines Ward.
Yeah, he's really he's legitimately one of those guys where like other teams are going to be like, yeah, we have to stay away from that guy sometimes.
He got like as has been going around, he got that dog in him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, if you wanted to draft an actual dog from Georgia, this is where you wanted to go. So it's,
I mean, just watch that video of him as a freshman where he just sunned that poor Georgia Tech defensive back and got kicked out and suspended for the next game, but still.
I mean, that's obviously you don't want to see quite that stuff, but the mentality, if you can control it, is going to be very beneficial to him as a player on the field.
Yeah, and he's so young. Like, obviously there will be some growing up to do. I think you could make the argument, okay, like him and Claypool are kind of have not identical, but similar, like kind of those attitude concerns or questions. Right. But I don't think they'll interplay with each other to be a detriment.
I don't think so.
And I think that having Pickens be the number 3 option as a receiver, maybe even number 4 option,
depending
in this
on how
offense,
to play it,
I think that's really good. Like, so you can bring him along slowly, where it's like, we don't need you to be the guy right now. And I don't know what Deonte's contract situation is going to be with how the receiver market is ballooning right now, but you've got at least a year where he can be brought along slowly. Then next year, maybe take a big leap forward, especially as he develops chemistry with whoever the quarterback is.
Especially,
yeah. So I love this pick. I need him in a number 1 jersey. If he's not wearing number 1, if he wears number 1, I might buy the jersey. Honestly,
yeah. I would too, but like my friend and I kind of have an agreement to stop buying receiver jerseys because like I never bought an AB jersey until the year before he went out of his mind.
Yeah,
and so we try to avoid that, but I got my boy here, so I'm good. I think that's what I need for now. So.
I might cop the Pickens color rush
Oh, that would
If
be
it's
fun.
one, that
Yeah.
might be the move. All
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
Move on the round 3 pick, which is very interesting. And I
Yes.
think I think you can make the argument this was the most surprising
I
pick.
would say so. I didn't think this is
Um,
where they would go. No.
yeah, so DeMarvin Leal, defensive end from Texas A&M. Now, going into this season,
Yeah.
DeMarvin Leal was my number 1 interior defensive lineman in the class because I projected him putting on weight and moving inside at the next level. And
Right.
this year was weird for him. He did not play very well, to be honest.
No.
I think he had issues like they were moving him around a lot. That defense was kind of weird. And he just never seemed to get comfortable. And if you look at his testing numbers, they were bad, but everybody at Texas A&M's were bad. I think there was
Yeah.
just
Something was
something
wrong there.
Yeah, I don't know if they built the facility uphill or if they
Something
had them
was
running into a fan that day or whatever,
I don't
but
get it. Yeah, it was weird.
at 6'4", 283, he's going to play that 5 tech, that 3-4 defensive end. And I was saying this to you before the show. I do not think this is Stephon Tuitt's replacement. I think that this is Cam Hayward's heir, if you will.
Ideally, yeah. I think that's more in line with what he does than what Tuitt does. And like we talked about this too, and you mentioned it. Like the biggest thing for him and what the Steelers can do is coming into this year, they need to determine both from him and from what they want from him, what is his most comfortable position, playing weight, whatever it's going to be. Make sure he's as comfortable in his own skin as he can be as a player, and then use him as needed. Then, like
Yeah.
him in the role that's going to fit him best.
Yeah, and so I looked up his snap distribution on PFF,
Right.
and it's actually interesting because the vast majority of his snaps in 2020 came as what they term as a Leo, so left or right end outside. So that's your 5 to 7 technique, honestly.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
you're definitively outside the tackle in a
Yes.
3-point stance. So not exactly what the Steelers will ask him to do, but
No.
like you were saying, or I think we were both saying, is that he is your 5th defensive lineman, essentially. Like he is behind Hayward. If Tuitt's back, he's behind Tuitt. Alualu, Wormley are all like ahead of him. So
Right.
you
To
do
start
not
off the
need
season at least. Yeah.
Yes, you do not need him to come in and be the guy in any way. And I think that's kind of the way that a lot of these picks are going to be, except for
Right.
Pickett.
Right.
And I think that, like I said, I said on another podcast that I think that if we look back at this draft in like 3 years, DeMarvin Leal could be one of the biggest steals of this class. And I had no connection of him to the Steelers whatsoever.
No.
Like I just thought this dude has great production. His testing numbers were actually not as bad as I thought.
No, especially if you consider him a defensive tackle.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. Then it goes up by a lot.
Which just means interior player. Because if you look at defensive end in Raz, like it's going to put in guys that are not the same type of player as him. So you want to look at defensive tackle to actually get a judge on that. So
yeah, exactly. So I think that I don't think this has any bearing on Tuitt. I think Tuitt is coming back based on everything they've said. And like I said, I don't think this is his replacement. I think this is a long-term piece that they are hoping to develop, and that he becomes maybe he becomes a starter in one of the final 2 years of his contract or something.
Right. And I do think it does mean though too that if Tuitt does not play, we're not nearly as concerned about the depth of this defensive line, because Wormley can be that guy to be, where Tuitt played last year like he was, and Leal can be that second guy that can come in for Wormley or just as a rotation in that spot.
Like we were saying, this keeps Henry Mondo off the roster, which
is
great.
Which would be fantastic. No offense to him personally, but I don't need to see kind of the same thing I had with Benny Snell last year. No problem with Benny Snell as a person, or Mondo as a person that I can tell of, at least, that I don't know anything. But you don't need to play for us. You could go either play somewhere else or just not play.
Yeah, they can do a lot better. So I'm very excited for how this pick turns out. I hope that he's still healthy and everything, and I'm very excited to see what he can do in the preseason. Next pick, another one pretty surprising but very fun. Wide receiver Calvin Austin III out of Memphis, and slot receiver, gadgety type of dude, but quick as a hiccup, incredibly fast. And like we were saying, he's got to start doing conditioning now, because Matt Canada is going to just spam this guy on any kind of jet sweep he can.
Yeah, it's again, this is the Ray McLeod role that he's going to play, except that he's an actual legit receiver, right? No offense to Ray. He's a legitimate
wide receiver 1.
Right, exactly. No offense to wide receiver 1, but he's a legit receiver prospect who also can do the stuff that we asked Ray to do last year. And I think as much as obviously he's going to be a slot-ish player because of his size, he showed the ability to get vertical. I think if you keep a press away from him, he can get vertical as an actual true deep threat as well, which is nice to have, especially in case Pickens comes along slowly or whatever for any reason. So he's going to get moved all over the field, I think, with Canada's offense. Like you said, he's going to be that motion guy, sweep guy, and he'll be dangerous in that role if he's used properly.
Yeah, this guy was absolutely dominant at the Senior Bowl, and like
the
only plays that were bad was when they had him attached to the line of scrimmage. He had to block Jermaine Johnson, which
obviously, I mean, he tried.
Yeah, he tried.
He has the effort down. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah. So. But Austin is really fun. So he came to Memphis as a track athlete, and
makes sense.
He was a 7-time All-State in track, 9-time state champion in sprints and relays. He was a track and field athlete of the year, multiple years, and when he was on Memphis's track team, they were like setting all kinds of school records. They qualified for NCAAs, and he also just like walked on the football team. And during his time at Memphis, he was twice a semifinalist for the Burlsworth Award, which is the award for like the nation's best walk-on in college football.
Right. Yeah.
And then basically like his role expanded as he kind of got more comfortable playing football, and like they were using him as mostly as a return guy, jet sweeps and that kind of stuff. But then then they're kind of like, oh wait, we can really use this guy. And in 2020, he has a massive uptick in production, especially a receiver, where he went from 25 targets to 119 and then 121 his final year. And he recorded over 1,000 yards receiving his final 2 years of Memphis with 11 and 8 touchdowns respectively. So
yeah,
this guy just is incredible with the ball in his hands. Like you said, probably a better like true receiver in terms of like route running and everything like that than he's given credit for. But yeah, he's just going to be really fun to watch. I'm very excited to see what he can do.
Yeah, he'll at the very least, like I said, he can do stuff that just not many guys we've had on the roster in a long time can, from an athletic standpoint and from just a speed standpoint. So it'll be fun to see how he's used. I'll like to think that Canada will be able to make use of him, good use of him as a rookie. But even if he doesn't play a ton as a rookie, I think he's going to be a valuable player in the future. So
yeah. Also, another fun high school stat for him. So he finished up his career with 3,492 all-purpose yards, and I believe he scored. So he totaled 49 career touchdowns in high school with 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, he scored a touchdown 6 different ways. So he scored receiving, rushing, punt return, kick return, interception return, and fumble return.
Yep, sounds about right.
Yeah. So, and again, a guy that does not have to be the guy. Like he is wide receiver 4.
Probably 4. Yeah.
Maybe 5. Like maybe
depending on how he looks.
Maybe they hit on Boykin. Having Anthony Miller,
yeah.
I like having Anthony Miller there, honestly. So yeah, I like this pick a lot, and it was great value getting him at the end of the 4th.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So now the Steelers had a pretty big gap in their picks. So, and I'll be honest, I did not love or even really like these last 3 picks, and we'll get into more why. But the first of them is Conor Hayward, the tight end fullback from Michigan State, who is Cam Hayward's younger brother, and this was just, again, so on brand for the Steelers, just getting another brother, making their 4th set of brothers on the team now, and getting a guy who, again, extremely versatile, played running back, kick returner, fullback, tight end, special teams, everything from Michigan State. And yeah.
I mean, what this comes down to is like, we expected it.
Yeah.
Because it makes too much sense. I think there's a chance that he does make an impact on this team in one way or another. Maybe it's primarily on special teams. Maybe he does get some snaps on offense. I mean, he's capable of doing a lot of things. He's very strong hands. He's a good receiver of the football. There is ways to get him involved in the offense that he's shown is possible. It just comes down to whether Canada and the rest of the offensive staff are interested in doing that or not.
I mean, I think you don't draft him unless you have those ideas in mind. Yeah,
because even then, because you probably could have gotten him in the 7th round. Maybe there are other teams that were interested in him in that way. But if you're going to draft him with not your last pick, but one of your last couple picks, especially before some of the other guys, I do hope that it's because they have the intention of finding a way to get him involved in the offense in some way.
Yeah, and I think they talked about this a little bit during the press conference and basically said, like, we envision him more as a tight end, honestly.
Right.
And if you think about Matt Canada's offense, like, he will be that off-the-ball tight end that's kind of in a wing alignment next to the other tight end. They'll use him on, like, the split zone where he slices back across the formation as a blocker or as a receiver. And like he's going to have an immediate impact on special teams, which at the end of the 6th round,
It's fine.
that's what you're drafting guys to be. And
Usually, yeah.
Derek Watt he will be a free agent after this season. He'll be 30. They theoretically could cut him and save a good amount of money on the cap. I think they'll keep him this year. And I think what the plan is all right, after this year, we'll let Watt go and Hayward becomes our primary fullback, whatever that means.
Right, and I think that the fact they're talking about him like a tight end tells you that that's likely what they're going to do.
Yes.
Right, because obviously 5'11", 233 is not exactly a tight end build, but it's kind of similar, honestly. He's not as good of an athlete, but that's what Samuel's role in college was for us. It's like whenever he was coming out of college from NC State. So like they're not very dissimilar in the ways that they could be valuable to an offense, and like he's not going to be getting true running back snaps, I don't think, ever, but you can hand him the ball in sweep situations. You can if you can get the ball in his hands, he's an effective runner after the catch, and he will run through people.
Yes,
as that bigger running back type.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, like he was a all Big Ten kick returner a few years ago, and has some deceptive long speed for a guy of his build.
For his build, like he's not. Again, there's a reason he didn't play running back anymore, once especially Walker was the primary guy there.
Yeah.
But he has that skill set still from doing that. He's a very natural runner with the football.
Yes. I just thought of this. Remember when Juszczyk was with the Ravens and he was like their third down back?
Right.
I think that could be a thing.
That kind of stuff could be how he's like. That's why, like, as much as the pick kind of feels like, it's Conor, it's Hayward, he could very well make an impact on this team in one way or another that makes it actually a legitimately good pick and not just like, oh, okay, yeah, we expected a pick.
Yeah, and I say I don't like these picks. I think once you get into the 6th and 7th round, it honestly doesn't matter, and like for that reason, you can find value. But some teams don't want to do that. They just want to all right, these are the guys that we really like, so we're just going to get them regardless. Right. Which that Steelers are one of those teams, I would say.
They're certainly one of those teams. Yeah.
The next pick is another, and honestly, these last two picks are very similar in that they are players that transferred multiple times. They were brought in for visits that were kind of out of the blue, and they are, I would say, almost reminiscent of like either former Steelers players or players that Steelers will face a lot. And the first one is Mark Robinson, who's a linebacker from Mississippi, and he was originally a running back, and he went to Presbyterian College, which I believe folded their football program.
I believe so, yeah.
So he transferred to Southeast Missouri, still as a running back. Next year, he transfers up to Mississippi, and they switch him to linebacker in the spring. And he played all 13 games in 2020, made 9 starts, and finished second on the team in tackles, nominated for that Burlsworth Trophy, where you're a walk-on. But he earned his scholarship in the spring. So
right.
And based on the people who were tweeting about it and how this guy plays, this is, hey, we want Vince Williams back.
Yeah, that's the gist, right?
Yeah.
He's a downhill player.
Oh, yeah.
Like, his lateral movement's not really there, even for a guy that played running back, which is interesting. He's a violent downhill player. So, I mean, if you want a guy that can fill that role at some point, maybe.
If you want a linebacker that is going to put a pulling guard on their butt, this is the guy.
This is the guy, yeah. So again, like, he's a guy that fits something that they had and probably obviously wish they still did.
He's also like identical in size to Devin Bush.
Pretty much, yeah. It's weird. It's kind of a weird body type.
It's Devin Bush, like, but angry.
Yeah, he's just the angry, I don't care about anything other than hurting the person in front of me version of Devin Bush, which, I mean, hey, that version of Devin Bush would be pretty good if the athleticism checked out.
Exactly.
But, yeah. But again, this is a guy, like you said, that if he does fit a role, it's going to be that, which is fine.
Right. And so, again, this guy's going to play primarily special teams. And I think, very similar to even the story of Vince Williams. My issue with this pick is you have at least 4 of these guys on the roster already.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Because so Miles Jack, Devin Bush are your starters, obviously.
Yes, obviously, yeah.
I think Robert Spillane is more like this guy than he is like the 2 starters.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Like, he is a special teams guy, and he's a good downhill thumper. Like, that's what he does well. You still have Buddy Johnson, who I'm
curious. Well, we'll see what he is.
Yeah, we still don't know, but I think that he could get some more playing time this year. I think last year he was hurt, like, still kind of figuring out the defense, and obviously the defense wasn't in a good place with the injuries up front and everything. So that wouldn't have helped. I think that would have hurt him in the long run, anyways. But you still have Marcus Allen. You still have Ulysses Gilbert III, but I mean, he probably will get hurt in training camp, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, he'll look really cool in training camp. He'll run around and then he'll break an ankle or something stupid. Yeah,
they keep having to Gray Scales around.
Yeah, whatever.
Forever.
Yeah, fine.
Christian Kuntz can technically play like linebacker as
Sure,
well.
yeah, why not?
And you still have Miles Killebrew. So there's like 6 guys that are theoretically ahead of him on the rotation for like special teams linebacker.
It's the Steelers like their linebackers. We
They
know this
do.
much, but
That's very
like
true.
at some point you're like, all right, maybe bring in some bodies elsewhere, but it is what it is.
Yeah, so it's a pick early in the 7th round. So do you do what you want? Like you want to get guys that you don't have to then fight for as a UDFA. So I get it, but it's just like, yeah, I wish there'd be a different avenue here. And with that, we'll move to the final pick, which again telegraphed by a visit,
Yes.
is the quarterback Chris Oladokun from South Dakota State. And I think when I messaged you, it's like, yeah, this just tracks because they bring him in for a visit. It's out of character. So you're like, all right, this probably means something.
Yeah, and also they wanted 4 quarterbacks. Unfortunately,
Hmm.
for reasons we know, didn't have 4 after even taking Pickett. So you go and get this guy who he's a 4th quarterback, right? Like that's what he's
Yes.
going to be. Maybe he's a practice squad stash. Maybe he's whatever. Because realistically, if I had to guess, we're going to go into training camp or not training camp of the season with probably because I don't did they go into camp with 3 or into the season with 3 last year and just had one of it was
I think it probably
Haskins
would have been
inactive, right?
right. Did they
Yeah,
still have Dobbs though?
at the start of the season, no, because he was injured to start the season,
Right. Okay. So
so he
yeah.
was on the roster, but as an
Mhm.
injured reserve player.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So if they go into 3, if like maybe if Rudolph either wants out or is tired of it, and we don't want him on the team because he's being annoying, maybe he could be the 3rd quarterback, kind of emergency guy. But even then, I think he's a practice squad guy,
Yeah.
most likely.
And luckily, I have a friend who does a lot of scouting of
Yeah.
FCS quarterbacks, so I actually have a lot of information about this guy.
Mhm.
So background, he was originally a 3-star recruit. He went to University of South Florida. He played a little bit. They transferred to Samford. He started there, and then I think there might have been like a COVID thing, so he
Something happened,
transferred to
yeah.
South Dakota State and got them to the semifinals of the FCS playoffs. Um, I think that the practice squad purposes, he is their Lamar slash Deshaun Watson
Scout
scout
team
team
guy,
guy.
yeah.
Yeah.
That would make a lot of sense, yeah,
Yeah.
it would.
But so very good arm strength, can throw the ball very well downfield without necessarily having good mechanics, quick release, good spiral, has the athleticism to be like a designed run threat. And, so athletes, and he's like, he's athletic and he can throw the ball hard and far. But he's gonna have to put on weight. His RAS has him at 213. He was listed at 195. So
Yeah.
if you're gonna be Lamar and Deshaun, like you don't have to
That's
be.
fine, yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
I'm sorry, I'm going. Here we go. He is a bit what's the word for like once he wants to get out of the pocket, he's trigger happy or
Yeah,
anxious in the pocket. Again, doesn't have greatest mechanics, doesn't necessarily need it. And needs to be more consistent with his accuracy.
right.
So
So he's a day 3 quarterback.
yeah, so my
Yeah,
friend, his summer, and this is Paul Duncan. He's at the
mhm,
football on Twitter. Uh, Chris Oladokun has the arm and athleticism to be a good backup QB, but will need to bulk up and improve his mechanics and decision making if he wants to stick. Look for a team to pick up Oladokun as a practice squad developmental QB, or it could be an effective CFL QB with improved accuracy.
right. Yeah, so that tracks, yeah.
And now again, what is the value of using a draft pick on this guy when there are more interesting, perhaps long-term useful players on the board? And with after this pick, Kalyn Barnes, the cornerback from Baylor, who ran the fastest time at the combine,
That's who I would have taken,
and
yeah.
Jalen Watson, who was a very tall corner, could be converting to safety at 6'2", 197. Those were the next 2 picks. And this team, corner's concerning. I think we can to get into this a little later with what their strategy is there, but getting those guys, I think, is like more effective. I would argue is better for your team building than using a draft pick on a 4th quarterback.
Right, and I think especially Barnes, I actually did like his tape a little bit
Hmm.
for sure. The speed, obviously, that's what got his name out there a little
Hmm.
bit more. And I don't necessarily think he plays to that speed, and not many guys who run that do per se.
Hmm.
But you can see the makeup speed. That's a big thing with him. I think he gets off the ground well and can contest catches. For somebody with his length, like he would have been a good developmental cornerback to have instead of it
Yes.
being because he has the athleticism to actually make good on it if he works out,
Hmm.
opposed to some of the other guys we have down in the roster. So it's I would have rather them do that. I think that the only reason that I would take him is if one you really think he actually can develop into a backup, and you're worried other teams would draft him in the next 15 to 20 picks.
Which is why you do it. And I'm
Right.
looking up his visits now because I wanted to see, like about if there was any other teams that he visited specific, and one of them was the Chiefs,
Okay.
and they had a
So
top 30 visit on him.
yeah. So
So,
maybe
and
yeah.
considering what I told you about his skill set, like that screams Mahomes.
Yeah, it's true. That would make
So
sense. So yeah, maybe they just were like, we know we want him on the roster in some way, shape, or form, and we're willing to take the pick on him. So
yeah,
which is fine.
exactly. So here's his visits. He visited the Bears, the Bucks, the Eagles, the Steelers, the Cardinals, the Texans, the Ravens, the Bengals, and the Chiefs. So
Yeah.
a long visit list, and it's like, all right, like let's just get this guy. And even though I think you could make the argument there were numerous quote better quarterbacks on the board at that time. Um, I think Carson Strong, obviously, like that knee is sand, I guess.
The thing that I don't understand about it is like I haven't seen any reports that say that he actually is basically a walking red flag entirely, like for the rest of his career. The thing that I've heard the most is that he needs a full redshirt year, which if that's all it comes down to, is that he's not going to be available for the season if they want him to get healthy fully. You got to take a chance on the 6th or 7th just to have the 4-year contract and not worry about it, don't
I
you
mean,
think? Right.
the stuff that I saw was that they had to like rebuild the cartilage in his knee with like
Right.
cartilage from other parts of his body. So like, and that
Yeah.
the condition is degenerative. So I think
If
that's
it's
why
if it is degenerative, then yeah,
I
that's
think
that's
that's
the
the big
point.
reason.
Yeah.
But
So
you still had guys like Jack Cohn, who again, like
Jack Cohn. Yeah.
he's
I
Jack
mean,
Cohn, yeah.
it's Jack Cohn.
You
Yeah,
have
he's
Cole
Jack
Kelly,
Cohn.
who's a big, like
He was
tall,
fun. He's
yeah.
fun. Yeah.
I think he ended up being Paul's number one FCS QB. It was one of his favorites.
He reminds me of that kid that the Bengals had on their practice squad for that Jake
Jacob
Dolegala, if you remember that.
Dolegala. Yep,
Yeah,
absolutely.
he's the same type of like just
Yeah,
big gigantic freak dude that just
yeah,
but still, yeah, a guy like him would have at least been maybe a little bit more interesting, but still, yeah.
yeah. So that is what it is. He's not. I don't think he'll play much outside of the
No,
preseason.
probably
I
not.
hope
No.
not.
Yeah, that we don't want a Devlin Hodges situation.
No.
No, congratulations on his retirement, by the way, wherever he's at. Good
Yeah,
for you, bud. But
yeah,
yeah, we don't need that to happen again.
yeah. All right, so that closes out the draft. We'll talk about some UDFAs right now. I have a few listed, and these are the ones basically from FBS schools because they're bringing in some guys from like the Pittsburgh area schools that I have no information on.
No,
Honestly,
yeah,
I
nothing.
don't know their names. So
Some of these guys, like no one's really gonna know a
right,
whole lot. Yeah.
yeah. So
So
the ones that I have, and there are a few of these that I actually really like, and like I
yeah,
wouldn't
there's
have been
two in particular
yes,
that I at a position we could use some better
yeah.
backups at.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So I think we're talking about the two running backs, and
Yes. Yeah.
one is Jalen Warren from Oklahoma State. The other is Mateo Durant from Duke. And with Warren, he was a transfer from Utah State, came to Oklahoma State, and was a big part of why they transitioned from kind of an air raid team to being like a very run heavy team.
Yes.
And he's like a short, squat, powerful, like bowling ball of a back. I know he's not like a great athlete by any means. I think you can make the argument he's not even a good athlete, but I think you have him versus Benny Snell, and I would say they're relatively similar players.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think Warren has a little bit more get up and go than him,
Yeah, I mean
just because
his 10-yard split was a 1.56, which was in the 84th percentile.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest thing with Snell is I just don't think he can get enough speed to really take advantage of his power,
Mhm.
right? Like he doesn't get going well enough. So like a guy, if you want a similar player in terms of style as him, but maybe that has just a little bit more juice, that could be his replacement there. And then Durant's an interesting guy for sure, especially after
Oh
his
yeah,
pro day workout.
yeah, and I liked Durant a lot. Like he was on an awful Duke team and was like their only good player.
Yeah, Duke was
Um,
bad,
yeah,
yeah.
awful.
They
Um,
were, yeah.
But
Uh,
he was really fun, like, and had some decent production.
mhm.
And he's kind of more actually. So before we move on from Warren's RAS was 4.83, Snell's was 3.69.
Yeah, that's why I said like just like both technically not good athletes, but a little bit more juice with Warren probably
Yeah,
than Snell. So
yeah, and actually they had the same exact broad jump. Snell's or Warren's vertical was 2 inches more. His shuttle was a little slower. His three cone was a little slower, but his 40 was better. His 10-yard split was a good bit better. So that's something. But with Durant, he's a very much like a traditional like outside zone runner, like very kind of like Shanahan-esque, but he
Yeah, I'm
can be
surprised he's not on the roster for one of those guys.
yeah, but
Honestly.
he can be valuable in the passing game
Mhm.
as a receiver. He's 5'11", 196. He has a 6.5 RAS. He ran a 4.43 40, 10-foot 7-inch broad jump, 35-inch vertical. His agilities were not very good. They were
No.
very poor, in fact.
He
So
feels like a very linear athlete that just when he gets in a straight line, he can get going really quickly.
yes,
And that's what it
exactly.
feels like, yeah.
Yeah, so I think I would like to see him make the roster just because I think he's very fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that one a lot. So the other ones I think are interesting. Jordan Tucker, offensive tackle from North Carolina. When this got reported, I tweeted at Alex Kozora of Steelers Depot, "Wake up, babe! New Zach Banner just dropped." Because this dude is just basically Zach
Yep.
Banner all over
Yeah,
again.
hey,
He's
that's they
6'6",
like those guys.
344, and his RAS was awful.
Yep, I mean, again, like there's types,
Yeah,
right, for teams, and if he fits the type, it's that.
and we when we talk about Sam Howell, we always talked about how his offensive line regressed and was pretty bad this year, and unfortunately, Jordan Tucker was part of that.
Yeah, they I mean the fact that did 2 or 3 North Carolina offensive linemen get drafted? Was it 2?
I think it was one.
I know that
Marcus McKeithen. Oh, Josh Azuda. Yeah, so
Yeah,
two,
Josh
two.
Azuda
Yes,
did too.
yeah.
Yeah,
So both
so
their guards got drafted, and then
right, so
um, uh, Tucker
yeah, he was
did
a
not. But
pickup,
I think he was kind of rotated out of the lineup as the season went on, and it kind of
yeah,
might have dealt with some injuries. That might have been why, honestly, because I am looking at his
partially,
grades now, and they really kind of slowly decreased. It might have been an injury thing.
probably, yeah.
But like he's a massive right tackle that they probably would want to move to guard, so you don't have to have him move as much, but
Yeah,
he can just clear the way.
that's about it,
That's
yeah,
about it.
so
Another one, Chris Steele from USC. I believe he's a former 5-star recruit. He originally went to
I
Florida,
think so,
but
yeah,
then
yeah.
left because there was some weird stuff with I think his roommate and some crime stuff that he was like, I just want to go home to. I think
He's
he's
like, "I
from.
want Mom, come pick me
Come
up,
come
I'm
pick me up. I'm
scared."
scared.
Which, hey, it's Florida,
He
man,
was a four
sometimes.
star for what it's worth,
Okay, yeah, so,
but yeah, I think it was it was like that.
yeah.
Actually, so 5-star. So yeah, um, I think there was some talk about him getting drafted.
Yeah.
he just doesn't have a ton of like playing time,
Yeah, he
honestly.
he he tested relatively well, did he not?
Yeah, I'm gonna get that pulled up right.
Relatively well, at least. I think it was
Yeah, I mean
his agility grades killed him, I
he's like
think,
six
probably.
foot two nine, well 190,
Yeah.
6'0", 195. So good size. His agilities were bad.
Yeah, I think that may have been what kinda killed him.
Yeah,
Again, if
but
you're because
ran
the
a four
corner,
four
yeah,
eight, 10-foot broad, 37-inch vertical. His arms are a little small. But I think this is a very solid, all right, we'll take a UDFA corner, maybe he could be a special teams guy and
right.
do something. So again, if that's good. Tyree Johnson, outside linebacker from Texas A&M. I like this one a lot. I really thought he would get drafted probably in the 7th, but um kind of played across from Leal. Obviously, he was kind of, if you think about this in like the way the Seattle defense operated, like he was the Leo linebacker to uh DeMarvin Leal's like big 5-tech defensive end. But
Right.
so has some pass rush upside, isn't the greatest athlete again, and that's why these guys aren't getting drafted because they're not great athletes, but pretty productive.
Right.
So I think he has a good shot to make the roster as like a, like this is kind of like the Jameer Jones thing.
It's the same type of,
Yeah.
yeah, you're taking a shot on a guy who might be able to be your 4th, 5th, whatever edge guy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm sort of kind of pulling. Okay, here we go. Yeah, so 2020 was his. I think that was just kind of Texas A&M's just best year.
Yeah.
But he actually had not, according to PFF, he had 9 sacks this year.
Yeah.
So pretty productive. Consistent pressure rates, I would say. Again, not the greatest run defender, but I think with the way they would ideally want to use him, that's not going to be where he's going to be asked to be like a major
Right.
contributor.
For sure.
All right. Any other UDF? I have some other ones listed, but do we even want to talk about them?
I mean, for now, like I want to see, like once we get into training camp, we get to see some of the guys show up, and like we'll be able to talk more about whether or
Yeah.
not they have any real shot to make a difference. So
Right. All right. So now we'll move kind of on from the draft because a few hours after the draft ended, the Steelers signed Damonte Casey, who formerly of the Falcons and I believe the Cowboys. And
yes, he
basically,
played for the Cowboys last year. Yeah.
okay, right. Um, And I think this is a very interesting move. I think this kind of takes them out of the Tyrann Mathieu sweepstakes. It
If they
seems like
weren't
he's
already, yeah.
yes, it seems like he's going to re-sign with this, or he's going to sign with the Saints.
That seems likely. Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like it. We'll
but
see.
Casey is a good NFL player. Like I think if you needed him to start, you could do a lot worse.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he had the 7 interception season, I think, what, 2018,
Yeah,
maybe? Something like
yeah,
that?
yeah.
2018, 19?
I'm looking up his numbers right now. Let's see coverage. Yeah, and so in 2018 he had 7 interceptions. And obviously it hasn't really matched that at all yet. But I mean, he had 2 interceptions last year. And he's like this. He's I would say he's like more of a pure, true free safety than Minka
Yes.
Fitzpatrick is, honestly.
Yeah, at least the way that Fitzpatrick's been used.
Right.
So, like, I feel like he probably would be like if Fitzpatrick got hurt, you'd want to slide him in free safety. Obviously, Cape Edmonds is strong. So, like, I don't know how he'll be used. I don't know if he was ever really played in the slot much at all.
I
Um,
don't think it doesn't look like it.
yeah,
In 2019, it looks like he was used there a decent
okay,
bit more. I imagine that might have had to do with like I think it was Ricardo
yeah,
Allen.
he was hurt. I
He
think,
was
yeah,
hurt, so they had him play a little bit there because he's not the biggest dude. He's only 5'11", 190.
right.
But I like this for like their dime packages because this allows you to like move Minka around a little more. And obviously, like he is dynamic as a back end defender, but teams aren't testing him, so it kind of defeats the purpose. So you can move Minka to the slot, and get him closer to the line of scrimmage where he can affect the ball more. Get some turnovers, deflect some passes, and you can just be. And I honestly like the 4 safety pack, the 4 or 5 safeties they have, like of Minka, Edmonds, now Casey. You have Carl Joseph, and then you have like Trey Norwood as kind of a special teams guy that.
Yeah, Norwood's kind of a weird player, but he's definitely I'd categorize him as basically a safety. So you can
Yeah,
throw him
but
in
and
there.
like I think we saw him play last year, and it's like we knew it's like all right, this guy's like not ready yet. But there were moments where it's like you can be a valuable like 3rd or 4th defensive back, and so give him some time to reacclimate, and then Killebrew is your like special teams guy.
Right. Yeah.
And Joseph is too, honestly. But like that's a good safety room that I'm hoping they kind of deploy those guys on the field as a group more this year.
I hope they do too, and I think that there's a reason why that this signing was made, and I think it's more than just having a player that can actually play free safety in case Minka
Hmm.
does get hurt. I think it is more of we need to have multiple guys that we're comfortable putting out there to give these guys not only a break, but give them also time to play together
Yeah,
with 3 or 4 of them. So
yeah. So this does bring me to the other thing, and it's that so the Steelers did not draft a cornerback, as
they
we
did
said.
not.
They still have about I think $12 million in cap space. Now, obviously, they're going to need to sign their draft picks, but usually that money's kind of allotted away. But is there a chance they bring Joe Hayden back?
I think that it's very possible. I think I just at this point I wonder like, does Joe want to come back and play at all, or for us if he's not going to start?
I mean,
Because
I'd frankly be very surprised. I don't think I can't imagine starting Levi Wallace, or I can't imagine starting Levi Wallace over him unless
yeah,
he has fallen off a cliff athletically, which I don't think he has.
right. But like I don't know at this point if they would have bothered bring Wallace in at the time they did if they weren't willing to bring Hayden back to start. That's my
Fair.
thought process. And maybe they just figured, they told him or he told them that I want to look elsewhere. Maybe that's the situation. I don't really know with him because we haven't really heard much of anything
Hmm.
about what his situation is. But if they bring him back and he's able to continue to start over Wallace, then great. And you have Wallace to play in there if he does fall off a cliff or if it doesn't look good. But I do wonder if it's just a situation that they're kind of done with each other. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's definitely possible. And
We'll
like
see.
I think it's good because they did not necessarily end on bad terms. So,
Right.
I think they're still open to the reunion. I think it's just a
Yeah.
matter of, is he getting an offer somewhere else, which I haven't really heard anything
But I
about
haven't
that.
heard zero news about him at all.
Yeah,
I haven't heard
so
anything.
I think, maybe it's another situation where they kind of wait to see how the preseason shakes out with, can Witherspoon continue to be solid? Is Wallace playable? Cam Sutton will probably again be the slot guy. And it's like, all right, if maybe somebody gets hurt, all right, now we got to call Joe.
Or Joe might even be at the point where he's like, call me in training camp.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point too.
Because
He's
like
like,
that's I mean, he's what is he going to be 34 this year,
and
right?
I
Or is
think
he already
he
34?
missed some time this year due to an
Yeah.
injury, and like I think
Yeah.
just kind of where. And last year was I'm looking at his PFF grades for what they're worth, but they were his lowest in terms of defense and coverage since 2016, which was his last year with the Browns.
Yeah, I think that maybe he is in a position where he's like, I'm gonna keep in shape and I'm gonna do all this stuff, but call me like second preseason game.
Mhm.
Like bring me in because like it's not like he needs to get acclimated to the team,
It was
right? Like
This is
so
actually also interesting. This was the first year since 2015 where he only played 286 snaps that he had 0 interceptions.
yeah, he's always been good at getting his hands on the ball. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, granted, eh, they didn't really when they did attack him, it felt like it was pretty much only times where like he was clearly beat. Like he didn't
Yeah.
have a lot of
Yeah. So he had
contested
0 interceptions
situations.
and
Yeah,
5 touchdowns against him.
right. So it wasn't there wasn't a lot of opportunities. I don't think
It
he
was
had to
actually
go to the ball,
it's
but
and in a similar vein, he had his worst like passer rating against or when targeted, or his highest passer rating when targeted since that year in 2015 where he got hurt. I think early on and missed most of the year. It was 119 when he was targeted. So, a lot of these numbers, and it's their numbers, so
their
take it with a grain of
numbers, they're
salt.
just
But
data points. Yeah,
yeah, but I think that they paint a picture that he is kind of starting to hit that age wall where it's like, all right,
yeah.
which they could still like transition him to being like the slot guy because he has been
Yeah,
solid
he
at that.
could be. Yeah, I
Yeah, and
mean,
then they,
especially if they want to give Sutton a chance to not have to play all the time in the
mhm,
slot. I think it would make sense for them if they do it if they think that he does have enough juice left to actually be a contributor on defense. Which the eye test last year tells me that his days as a full time starting outside corner probably should be over,
mhm,
but not necessarily that he shouldn't be on a roster. Right? There's that in between area. That I think is kind of where he's at right now.
yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that again, their corner room is a little deeper than I think people think. Like, obviously, you have
Yeah.
Witherspoon, and Witherspoon could be volatile. Wallace is limited. Sutton's a good player, again, in a specific role, but they signed Isaiah Johnson, who was a third, like I think, like a third round pick by the Raiders a few
Yeah,
years ago.
third or fourth. It was one of those two.
Was surprising, and I don't think he's played particularly well, but he's 6'2", 210, so he brings a much different um profile than a lot of players have, at
Right,
least for the Steelers in the
outside of
past.
Witherspoon, he's really the
Yes,
only
exactly.
long corner, yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna try to see if I can find his. Here we go. Fourth round pick by
Yeah,
the
so far.
Raiders. He actually hasn't played any snaps since 2020, so that doesn't bode well.
No, but again, like, it is the Raiders' defense. I
That's true.
mean,
It's a good
they
point.
did kinda struggle to find contributors at all, so I think with the corner room, like, I personally think they're comfortable with where they're at for this season specifically,
Hmm.
and they felt like they could get away with having this corner room for at least one season and then decide how they want to attack it down the road because there's already so much capital and money's frankly put into this defense. It's only going to go up when Minka gets his extension and stuff like that. So I think they're waiting to see if any of these guys can be long-term starters possibly for them or at
Hmm.
least the next 3 or 4 years. And if they don't work out, then they'll attack it probably heavily next year. So
We also haven't mentioned at all Justin Lane, James Pierre, and Arthur Mollett for what it's worth.
yeah, granted we know them. So
Yeah,
you know.
but I mean,
we
Mollett was
yeah,
solid. Mollett was
yeah,
solid.
well, that was
Yeah.
fine. I think him being back makes sense. I think honestly, you hope that Pierre does slowly kind of get better when he does have to play. Again, he's a guy that he kind of has to be perfect, right, for it
Yeah.
to work because he doesn't have the athleticism to make up
No.
for not being perfect. So he's always going to be a like kind of low ceiling player.
Mhm.
Justin Lane, I think should just be happy he's on a roster for the
I would
time
say that
being.
this is put up or shut up time.
Yeah,
Like this, I think it's
yeah,
contract year time.
yeah,
It's if it's gonna happen, it's got to happen now. So
yeah.
maybe
I
he
don't.
has the fire lit under him. Maybe he actually contributes.
Maybe, yeah,
But,
but I mean, I'll see it when I see it. I'll talk about it when I see it.
yeah. Before we close out, so the Steelers did not draft a running back or tight end, and those were two
Yes.
positions that we thought they might go after for like getting a depth guy. Or a guy that is again not the starter, but just a guy who's gonna be like the number. And I
Right.
guess you could argue that Hayward is he's both. You could argue he's both.
Yeah, technically, yeah, but I I don't know.
So like, are you surprised by that, or do you think like the team just never really thought of that as positions of need?
I do wonder because I think if I'm not mistaken, didn't a couple running mid-round running backs go right before 138? I think Pierre
Let me
Strong
check. I
did
think
for the Patriots.
Pierre Strong. I think Zamir White, Isaiah Spiller were around that range.
Okay.
Let me see. Well, so Bailey Zappi went the pick before, for what it's worth.
Yeah, well,
Hassan Haskins went about 10 picks
yeah,
earlier. Pierre Strong about 15, and then but 20 picks earlier, Zamir White and Isaiah Spiller went back to back.
Okay. So that's what I think personally happened. I
Yeah.
think that group of running backs is who they were comfortable maybe adding to the team. I talked about Strong a lot just because I think his skill set's so different from Najee. That has been a nice compliment. But any of those guys really would have been quality backups, if nothing else.
Jerome Ford went to the Browns like 20 picks later.
Which I'm kind of I'm surprised they didn't like him. I understand like getting Calvin Austin there's also great, so like I'm not upset with that at all. But I think that maybe if one of those guys that did go in the 20, 30 picks beforehand were there, that's possibly where they could have
like Ty Chandler, Kyron Williams went late, and Kyron Williams has the athleticism concerns, but still like a very productive player. But and with tight end, I think most of the good quote actually, well, Isaiah likely went to the Ravens with the next pick, of course.
Yeah, of course they did. Yeah.
But I think by that point, at least in the 4th round, there weren't a lot of great quality options left. And by the time we get to the 6th round pick with Hayward, who again is kind of a tight end, that's when you're really kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah, I mean, I would have liked to see them maybe bring in a tight end as an undrafted free agent, like Austin Allen from Nebraska went to the Giants. I believe.
Yeah, that was.
He would have been nice to have to be the 3rd tight end. Again, it sounds like Hayward's going to be that guy, which again is weird because of it, but
and so like obviously they have Freiermuth and Gentry and now Hayward, but they also have they signed Jay Sternberger, who was a 2nd round pick a few years ago.
Yes.
And they still have Kevin Rader, Kevin Rader is what he is, but
so
I think
maybe one of those guys fills that spot.
Yeah, they're just more comfortable with that room than perhaps we thought. I'm looking at see if there's any names that. You heard anything about Curtis Hodges from Arizona State?
I've heard of him. Yeah.
Okay. Did you see anything about where he ended up?
I didn't. I don't.
Washington Commanders.
Was that where it was? Did he get drafted or was he
no, just
UDFA. So. Okay, I thought so. Okay.
Because I kind of thought he might be interesting. I know Jalen Wydermyer ended up with the Bills. Let me see. Anyways, we don't have to talk about 7th round UDFA tight end. So that'll do it for us for this episode. We'll be back. I guess next week I think next week we'll talk a little bit more about how the other teams drafted, kind of where the Steelers stand now in the AFC and in the AFC North. In the meantime, Shayne, let the people know where they can find you and your work.
Find me at Shayne Kubis, like always, on Twitter, as it says on the screen here, spelled wise. Don't forget the Y. I don't know if anyone has just SHANE anywhere, but I don't need them to be bothered by me. You can also look at anything from Steelers ATB on Twitter, or just ATB in general. That's where you can find us right now.
All right, you can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE, on Twitter. Make sure you're following Steelers ATB. Make sure you're following Around the Block on any platform you can find them. Thank you for tuning in. We hope to have you back next time.